Today we'll be discussing gestures and general shapes of the body. Hello everyone, welcome. Today we'll be discussing gestures, which is basically just stick figures. Let's think about really quick sketching, really fast, really loose, not details, nothing too precious, nothing too exact. When we first start trying to draw a human, the first things we want to think about are the three basic shapes of the body. So I have my wonderful friend Rick Andrioli as my model, my assistant. I'm going to show you just a quick example. We want to do basic head shape. We want to think about basic sort of an egg rib cage-ish. I'm going to run out of space. And then a basic sort of pelvis shape. From that, go legs. We're running out of space. Actually, here we go. Let me start this new page. Let's do it smaller. Head, rib cage, pelvis. From that, we have basic legs, feet. And if you notice when I do my legs, it's not really straight. It's sort of a bowing. There's a lot of different shapes that I'm kind of creating, but these basic forms will never change, never squish, never bend. And so let me highlight that for you. May get, of course, some from breathing and whatnot from the rib cage, but overall these shapes will always stay the same. And let's do it from the side. Cage, pelvis, leg, bows out, and forward. And so as well, we have these basic sort of head, rib cage, pelvis shape. We also have this basic, our legs and the flow of our arms. This leg shape, it's not straight. We have this bowing happening, and then there's this counter bowing that's happening in the lower legs. And you'll even see it in the front, and you can kind of see it actually even here on his shin. It's sort of this, that's literally the shin bone as it goes down to that. And so from that too, and we can even follow along on this simple, missing a hand, and my son added extra, he needed paint. But this is the arm bone. And we can even see this is very simple, like a little thumb situation, mitten experience, very simple foot. These are not supposed to be detailed. When you're drawing a gesture, oops, let me get my rib. There you go. When you're drawing a gesture, it's supposed to be fast, it's supposed to be quick. You're not supposed to stop and think and worry about the specifics. So with this in mind, we just want to think about these basic shapes, basic sort of forms first, and then we can kind of play in and add some life to it. And I'm going to flip the page, and I'm also going to, let's just do a quick little sketch of Rick. Even though it's not really him, he's not moving, he's stationary. When I look at a model, the first thing I do is actually a line of action. What is that? Why did I just draw a giant squiggle on the page? You may have seen that with my still life drawing as well. Any sort of drawing, you should have a line of action. And what is that? Why am I drawing this crazy line? What I'm doing is literally, it's almost my eye tracking. My eye is sort of seeing, I picked it up here, I followed his head, I floated there, and it's basically this flow down the body. Some people would say it could just be the spine, theoretically, then it would just be a straight line. I want to keep movement. Even though it's a photograph, I still want them to feel like they're alive and it's moving. So I kind of create that sense of reminder almost. It's just notation. All of this are just construction notes. So I'm going to definitely run out of room here. Let me make his head smaller. Now, general rib cage, feet, legs, knees. And the knees can be just like circles. You can see the joints, and even the belly theoretically can be a sphere as well. You can even think about the center line for the rib cage. That always helps. And then outward, you can literally do spheres, cylinders, spheres. Whoops. Come on, buddy. Of course. Hands. There we go. Quick, very fast, very loose. Oftentimes when you're doing a gesture, you have maybe 2 minutes at the longest, at the least be 30 seconds. So you do not have time. I want to go back to that one, but let's do this really quick. I just want you to think about this is what would be considered contrapposto. So in these first original, this pose right there, that's the Egyptian presentation of the human form theoretically is equal weight distribution on each foot. The shoulders and the rib cage are of equal horizontal alignment. That shift happens in humans theoretically. It's this, we're not machines. And the ancient Greeks discovered that the contrapposto, which is counterpose, that creates a sense of life and it creates a sense of movement. And that shift in balance of weight, of moving from one hip to the other, because we don't stand square. We're not Egyptian gods just standing there and like walk like an Egyptian. It's not, we're alive. And so you can see sort of the golden age of the ancient Greeks, they realized that. And so you'll notice these sculptures were suddenly like, they're shifting their weight. There's a tilt of the shoulders, not just up and down, but also forward and twisting. There's this awareness of weight distribution. It's no longer this static square, I'm a god form. It's now I'm a breathing human being, just happens to be made out of marble. And that creates that sense of life that we recognize as human. And if we can capture that, that's going to help us to draw more lifelike drawings, whether that's a comic book, whether that's any sort of figure. It can even be an animal, any sort of creature. That's going to be true. Even a tiger, as they put their weight down, their shoulders are going to push up. And so there's just that awareness. So I'm going to quickly just do a quick little sketch of Rick as well in this wonderful costume. Rick is part of the Cirque School in Los Angeles, and they have been putting on a virtual figure drawing session in the past year and a half. And so I've had the honor to attend and also at times teach. So that's why I have reference from them. So I'm quickly rendering out my basic shapes. I'm thinking about basic forms first, head, rib cage, pelvis, that sort of order of operations. And then the next question I always ask myself first, after I've sort of laid in my line of action, my head, rib cage, pelvis, is where's the weight? Again, because of that ancient Greek concept of weight distribution, where do I rest the majority of my body weight on which appendage? And so with that, I can see that he's resting it on his left leg, which means the right leg can push down. And so you can almost see there's a shift that's happening. And so there's actually this tilt. He's making it more square with his shoulders to kind of counterbalance that because he's pushing. But even then, there's still a slight little tilt. I can kind of see there's still, he's trying to kind of balance it out and try to stay square, but it's still kind of tough because his right leg is the one that's doing all of the work. And so even when I'm in a 30-second gesture, even in that time, I'm going to think about what is the leg that's consuming the most or holding us up off of the ground from pushing against gravity. And then I do secondary leg. And so this is this idea of just like who's priority, who's more important, who is sort of more in the order of operations, the dominant, and then the one that's sort of passive and the one that's afterwards. So with that now, I'm going to add quickly little hands just really fast. May even want to exaggerate that. We'll go over arms and the anatomy of all of the basic forms of the body as well in other classes or in other episodes. That you can even start doing the center line and the brow line, which is also helpful because that can also determine tilt. We'll discuss that as well in another with the head. But I just want you to kind of think of that awareness of these shapes. You can then add in the props if you have time, because you always want to have a sense of placement in space. So I'm going to kind of quickly, whoop. Let's see, where is this? Whoop. And then he's wearing swim fins, so we'll add a little swim fin to the edge there. Very, very quick, really, really fast. Obviously, I'm taken probably more time than was probably in the pose. The pose, I want to say, is maybe a minute that he was holding this pose for. And then theoretically too, if you wanted, if you even have time, you can start adding in costume and kind of filling in really quickly. But this is this idea of just getting the basic sort of shape first, whoops, and then moving on. In theory, any drawing, any portrait that you do, whether it's a gesture or a final portrait of a loved one or whatever, a masterpiece, any sort of piece of work that you do, you should theoretically maintain the gesture. That should never be lost, should never lose the life, because in a sense, even though we understand the weight distribution of the Greeks and how we can, the contrapposto shift of the shoulders and hips, we inherently want to straighten everything up. We want to make everything square. We subconsciously want everything to be in nice little grids in comfortable little boxes. And so we have to fight that urge. Hence why I do the line of action. I want to push it so far that it'll actually become right. You want to go beyond what's comfortable, because what's comfortable tends to be too rigid and too inaccurate. We immediately start reining it in and being afraid of it being too much. And so like this is an example, woo! It's my line of action, because I'm just like, I almost see her hand first and I swirl down to her face and then I swirl back down to the feet. Now I can start thinking about placement. Head, rib cage, again, where's the angling? This will help me tell the story. Rib cage, pelvis. And so she sort of has an even distribution, but even then it looks almost like her left leg is carrying more weight. And this sounds strange too, but okay, so in a gesture you may not have time, but in like a figure sculpture, figure drawing where it's like hours, get into the pose, stretch it, feel where your body, there's tension and compression. When you feel it, you're intuitively going to know, it's going to make sense to you when you try to render it. It's just, there's this level of like empathy that happens that, here we go. So I'm just trying to like feet. So you can see this almost is stretching as the hip is kind of pulling, and there's this space between the rib cage, and there's going to be this like compression right there. We can add the costumes, but then I theoretically, and I always try to do this, like head, rib cage, pelvis, legs, because that's our pushing and connecting up from the ground and lifting up. And then the secondary, those are sort of the appendages wise would be the dominant, the most important part. And then the arms, they're not working as hard to keep us standing. So that's sort of the, if you have time, add some arms in. You know, and oftentimes, you know, even then you may not even be able to have like voluminous arms, but at least it's like, even if it's just sticks or something. And then even then it's like, do I have time to add her prop? Do I have time to add the hat? Face. And then we can even add the brow line this way. It's kind of tilted, right? We can start to play. And I even like to add in, just as a quick little noodle, just a little bit of an ear situation. We can go even extra, add in the jacket, right? This is like dependent on the amount of time that you have, but as you have more time, you can allow yourself to build off of that underlying sketch that theoretically, let's see, I'm finding red. That underlying sketch is basically your guide, and that way you can use that to build from. It's not supposed to be the final. It's supposed to be like construction lines. It's just quick little sketches. So, yeah, there you go. Let's just do that. See what I'm seeing. So, whoop, whoop. We'll play with costume as well in another episode, and just want to show you the idea of even playing with. See, sometimes I'm like, I give her that, but she doesn't even have like lower legs. So, you know what I mean. But this is this idea of pushing it. You may even want a floor plane. Quick, very sketchy, very loose. Let's do another one of them hanging. This is a challenge. Normally in traditional figure drawing classes, it's a model standing on a stand, standing. We have a circus performer, an aerialist, hanging from ropes. Now, where's the weight? Like, what does that mean? And so no longer do we just say, okay, legs come first. Theoretically, his arm is going to be the first concept of like pushing from the ground, pushing up to stay away from falling towards the earth. And so again, I'm going to think about my line of action. What's my line of action? Woo! Crazy, weird, big. There's roughly the head. Let's do roughly sort of a rib cage situation, roughly a pelvis. And then because I was saying it's like the where is he keeping from the ground is pushing this, and then that's really to make that sense. So that's initially that first, which will then flow up. It sounds strange, but flow that way, and then that'll travel that way. And now I can add in the legs, because the legs, they're really sort of just hanging, they're holding on by the ropes, but they're not doing as much work. So in a sense, they're now secondary. So I'm going to add a little foot, and then let's see, draw this thigh, but then this leg. And you can see these are generalized shapes. I'm not trying to be precious with it. I'm trying to just get a general form, and maybe I have time, which can also sometimes help, is coloring in the shape of the foot. See, I'm off. I need to add his leg way up higher. And that's all right. That's part of it too, is that we can adjust. This is vine charcoal, it's super loose. And part of it too is in a figure sketch, in a gesture sketch, you don't want to be noodling it too much. You want it to be loose. Just trying to find my placement. Where am I? This, and then it wraps around his arm. It goes up and then up. And so sometimes you may have that time. Let's see, let's do ear, and a really quick ear situation. And then maybe even like a nose, the jaw, and then the throat. Really can kind of like push that sense of like I'm reaching. And then maybe we can add the shirt. But this is again dependent on, do we have time? How much time is this pose? This pose I know he held for like a minute. So that's all you get. So I'm taking way much more time in a sense than I would have otherwise. But that's okay. Like I'm trying to show sort of for dramatic effect, but I want you to be able to see, let's see, I'll just make that orange so you can kind of see the belly. What does it mean to draw a quick sketch? What does it mean to draw a quick gesture, and why it's important? Like, why does it even matter in figure drawing? Well, it's not just a warm-up. So here's a challenge. It's got two of them, one on top of the other. Again, this would be a pose that would be about 30 seconds to a minute tops. Thankfully, it's just a photo for the moment. But this is, again, we almost don't even have time. So if I'm thinking about if I had just a minute, what would I do in that time? Quick little thing. I try to do a line of action for each figure, theoretically. Quick little head shape, rib cage, 3/4, because we're seeing from the side, kind of. She's sort of at a 3/4 angle. Rib cage or pelvis, legs, 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 legs. Since he doesn't even have a face yet, I'm not going to give her arms until I define him. Give him a rib cage, give him his pelvis, which means legs are coming out. There's a bit of foreshortening that's happening. And then some feet being pointed at us. Legs, knee. Let's point the toes. Now I'm going to, he's sort of using his arms to hold her up. I'm going to use that too. This wraparound shape. And then you can see this is like, I'm really basic. We're literally like stick figures that can then be expanded upon. We don't have to have it has to be accurate immediately. There's this idea of construction lines. Find it first, and then you can fill in the blanks later. It's about notation for yourself and what that means first, and then we can kind of find it. So we've got that. Now I want to fill in for her. Now that he's got a presence, I'm going to fill in her body, give a little bit of an arm, and even then I'm taking way more time than I would be allowed. They would have already moved by now, for sure. But you can see quick, very fast, but yet at the same time it communicates a lot. That's two people standing. Theoretically, again, if we had time, you'd add ears, you can add all these other things, but we don't have time for that. Like, this is something that's supposed to be quick, it's supposed to be snappy, and you just want these basic shapes, you know. It's really that then theoretically you can use to expand upon. You can then take this and if you had a photo, go and finalize it. You could turn it into a painting. But if you don't have this underlying like life and energy in your drawing, it's gonna look static. It's gonna look like it's just not alive. It's not breathing. So this is the next challenge we're going to do right now is, first I've sort of done a bit of lecture and whatnot and sort of showed you guys the basics. Now we're actually going to draw for real from them doing gestures, and they will be posing and it will be a video. And so that in itself will be a challenge, right? Because with a photo, you can stop, you can noodle it, you can say, wait, that's not right, it's got to get this angle. When you're drawing from video or when they're performing live, you can't tell them, wait, that doesn't work. Like, stop, move over there. There's none of that. You have to kind of go with it and just sort of capture what you can capture and then move on. So with that, I am now going to hit play. Presenting, yay! They're gonna do a group of about 3 or 4 different poses really fast. So here we go. Head, rib cage, pelvis, legs, 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 feet, legs, feet. Let's see, where's his head? Shoulders, shoulders. He's got rib cage, legs, feet, legs, feet. You can kind of see it starts to get a little crazy, but I mean, when, especially with 2 models, but the more time that you have to be able to render, obviously, we have 30 seconds. So it's not a lot of time, right? We have to really be quick about it. We have to be very loose. That's what it is theoretically. Gestures are a warm-up, but it also can be something where it's an exercise and practicing being in the moment. It's about being present. What do I see right now? What's happening right now that I can do and capture to communicate these 2 figures performing and working really hard, honestly, because this is not easy work, for sure. They are incredible performers and athletes and artists themselves. So as you can see, I'm kind of quick. Let's see, get her a second leg, other foot, and done. Don't even have time for more. You can see 30 seconds. Very, very fast. And now it's as though we're attending a session together. I'm gonna move this guy. And this, I think, was from, now her head's gonna get cut off a little bit, but that's okay. We can fill in the blanks. We don't need it. That's part of it too. We can use our brains. We can analyze. We don't have to always be, I need to see it in order to understand it. The more that you start to render and the more that you study the human form, the more that you can fill in the blank. Okay, so here's her head. Rib cage, pelvis, legs, legs, arms, arms, feet, and done. Maybe I've got a ground plane. 30 seconds. Very, very fast. I'm also, just notice I do these like sort of practice swings, these golf practice swings. It's my brain sort of interpreting it and trying to do it first before I even, king of the world, look at them. Okay, this is awesome. Rib cage, pelvis, legs. Actually, it's kind of like bloop, bloop, beeps. Her head, her rib cage, her arms, her legs. She's flying. Now I'm gonna add his arms. It's very much, see? And even then, I'm like, quick. Very, very fast. I don't even know where his feet is. That's okay. Now it's happening. All right, get ready. Oh, and this is what's great is, yep, there we go. Here we go. Now they're gonna flip it. So I'm gonna flip. Sometimes you can kind of get a little extra because I know they're not gonna change much from this pose, so I can kind of already start pre-drawing and kind of pre-interpreting. And then where is she? Oh my goodness, hanging upside down. This is incredible. They are amazing. arms, and then where are her legs? Okay, legs, feet. This is what the fun part too is, this challenge. It challenges our idea of what is the human body, where are the shapes, what does it mean to have gravity and form, right? What is all of this idea of figure drawing, especially with the circus? Yay! Thank you guys. Take a bow. Wonderful. So I'm going to zip through and just pull this back up, these guys, the two of them. And I want you to think about, again, this general idea of these basic shapes. I'll do a quick little example. Want to think about, and he has his head turned. Head, rib cage. And especially if you have time, you can see I'm sort of systematically trying to work on one as I work on the other. I don't want to have one be fully complete and the other one not even have a, shape at all. Sometimes you run out of time and you're like, you're frantic, but theoretically you definitely want to be able to make sure that you can capture everything, and that, if it's at least get a squiggle is better than nothing. And so I think this is a challenge of pushing beyond what we expect figure's supposed to be. And when we're drawing a person, there's this expectation of perfection. And so I really work hard at trying to get people to understand to let go, and that perfection doesn't help us, that progress, here I'm gonna push him over, he's a little too far to the side. Progress, what does it mean to find progress and to actually improve, right? Do beyond, perform or create beyond what we think we're capable of. I think a lot of times we definitely limit our own ability and limit what we think we're able to do. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'll never be able to draw like that. Oh, and we already start, failing before we even try. And so I feel like with gestures, we have an opportunity to let go, be loose, be more forgiving of ourselves, and not be so expecting of perfection, and finding more joy, I think, in creating something that's going to be unique, and that will just give you these tools to be able to then draw and do portraits, to be able to then draw people, to go to a figure drawing session, whether in person, hopefully, or virtual, and have some tools so that when you see the forms, you're not going to be overwhelmed. You'll actually have some sense of, I know what I'm doing. I think I can do this. So with that, I think this will wrap up our gesture drawings for today. Next episode, we will be discussing the torso.